What's going on, everybody? WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell, and I'm here to tell you that you guys are the best, the absolute best. We started with Patreon recently, as you well know, and we have over 50 people now. And the amount of support that you guys are giving us and trust you're putting in us to build the site to the next level and to reward us or support us for the things that we've done in the past is just phenomenal. It feels great. If anybody out there wants some extra access to the site and some extra things, you can join up at patreon.com/WFNY, patreon.com/WFNY. I'm keeping it short and sweet this week. Now, here is the podcast.
Waiting for next year.
What's up, everybody? It's the WaitingForNextYear.com podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lindell, and it's been a little bit since I've talked to you. It's been a little bit hard to get things scheduled lately. Everything seems to be working against me in terms of podcast scheduling. I'm out to a couple guests, and a lot of them haven't gotten back to me, and the ones that have, I had scheduling issues. I was supposed to talk to Dave Sterling last night on a Sunday, and then, believe it or not, I had to postpone the podcast myself due to hiccups. Yes, that's right. I had the hiccups for like 3 hours on Sunday evening, to the point where I just couldn't commit to sitting on a microphone and talking sports with Dave Sterling. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I actually get hiccups a lot now that I kind of got myself in shape. So now whenever I go off the reservation in terms of eating and I overeat a little bit, I overindulge just a tiny bit, I end up getting the hiccups. And those hiccups last for extended periods of time. And I don't necessarily think it's hysterical, but it is kind of funny. It's funny that that's a reason that I couldn't podcast with Dave Sterling yesterday. But I did have some thoughts on some topics, and I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to get a podcast up there this week, and hopefully a few if some of these guests come through, and they should come through eventually. I was on the exercise bike this morning and looking at Twitter, as I sometimes do, and I saw Ken Carman, who's really funny. I really like that show. But he was saying that, he wanted to admit it, that he doesn't like the Super Bowl. And I'm with him. I am absolutely with him. I agree wholeheartedly. I didn't hear his rant, so I don't know how much of this is like the same exact thing that he was saying, but it's like the whole week, the week leading up to the Super Bowl and having an extra week off, it's from an era gone by. Having an extra week of media is ludicrous in 2017. With the speed of media and the speed of marketing and the speed of all this stuff, having an extra hype week is a complete waste of time, because we can fit a hype week in 2 days now. The idea that something that's going to come out of Media Day as a novel concept, that was blown to pieces by the Seattle Seahawks a couple of years ago. I mean, we know exactly what we're going to get and what we're not going to get. We know everything that's going to happen. It's so old now that it's fallen all completely into cliche territory. Nobody's going to surprise anybody with anything that they say, and if they do, it's going to be almost like a protest of having to participate in Media Day to begin with. So really, what are we doing? What are we doing with the extra week? It's another situation where the NFL can't realize that it's just a day gone by. The same thing with commercials. We talk about how the commercials suck now, and they don't. They're the same. They're the same quality they've always been. The world around us has changed, however. We used to be able to get blown away by a 1 or a 2 minute video, and that was before Vine, and I know Vine's dead, but now YouTube and Facebook and Instagram video and Snapchat. We know people who are super talented making 30-second videos and 1-minute videos. We know people who are brilliant at making short-form video, and we probably follow them, and we look at them on our phone daily, weekly, hourly in some cases. I mean, the competition for our attention on 30-second video is infinitely higher than it used to be. So Coca-Cola polar bears, as touching as they are and as touching as they continue to be, they don't get to make the same impact they used to get. It's not possible. The Clydesdales, even the funniest version of the frogs, the best Doritos commercial money can buy, or the best Doritos commercial they can find on the internet by letting people create their best version of a viral video. I mean, you can't compete. And even if your videos are better, they're only marginally better than XYZ YouTube star who we all know and love. There's only so much room for improvement today in a saturated market of short form video. So anybody who wants to sit around and rank the commercials and watch them and pretend like it's 1989 again, I mean, be my guest, but you're delusional. It's a different world. It's a different world. And half the people who used to watch the commercials are now no longer watching the commercials. There's a certain amount of people who always use the commercial breaks to go to the bathroom so that we could have those old Snopes type stories about the water supply in the United States going down during the commercials of the Super Bowl. People always use the commercial breaks to go load up on food or hit the head or do whatever they wanted to do. But now not everybody, but even higher percentage of people are ignoring those commercials because they pick up their phone and they look and they see what their cousin Jerry is saying about the game. Or, I mean, they're talking to their friends. They've got 150 different chat rooms sitting in the palm of their hands. So no, they're not watching the commercials, and they're not watching the same way. And even if they wanted to, they've probably already seen the commercials because the companies posted them to YouTube and Facebook weeks and weeks before the actual Super Bowl, because they spent $100,000 and they spent $5 million to put the ad on TV and all this stuff. They're not going to limit their exposure to just that 1 minute. They're going to be posted everywhere on every single platform. They'll have an Instagram version, a Facebook version, a Twitter version, a YouTube version. They would have had a Vine version, but that died. My point is that it's not the same thing. And so I do kind of hate the Super Bowl. I mean, I don't hate it. My relationship to it has changed drastically, though. I'm not hyped by it. I love football. I can't wait to see the game, but it's really just kind of another football game to me. The pomp and circumstance around everything else, it just doesn't mean anything to me. It's not that important. It's just not that important. And so we can pretend that, the world's the exact same it was in the late 80s and early 90s, but it's not. It's not. And the NFL needs to admit that to themselves, and or maybe they'll just stay in denial forever. They seem to stay in denial about everything else. Well, at least a lot of things. Anyway, let me know. Are you still hyped for the Super Bowl? I want you to email me, Craig@waitingfornextyear.com, and I want you to tell me if you're hyped about the Super Bowl. That's the method of feedback I want you guys to use for me all the time now, because then if there's something interesting, I will read it on the podcast, and it'll be fun for everybody. Craig@waitingfornextyear.com. All right, so next, I'm not going to talk about politics, but I want to talk about the whole stick to sports thing, which we have been inundated with over the last few weeks. I think everybody's been inundated with it over the last few weeks because of the inauguration and everything that's gone on with President Trump. The intersections between sports and politics have been immense. And I'd like to say that I think at Waiting for Next Year, and maybe I'm stroking I'm stroking myself here, but I'd like to think that we do a pretty good job of really sticking to sports and only delving into politics and things when the through lines are there. But recently some people were critical of Scott's post about Greg Popovich and what he had to say about the president. And I took exception to that, not because, I just had my brother's back, which I do, but I think I can be critical of us and Scott and myself whenever, and anybody else at the site when we're out of our lane. But in this case, I don't think we went out of our way to talk about President Trump. I don't think we went out of our way to talk about Greg Popovich talking about President Trump. It's just that Scott was there when Popovich went off on him. Popovich chose the pregame before the Cavaliers to make these statements, and Scott was there, and so all of a sudden that vaults that story into relevancy for us and our audience. And I thought Scott did a good job making it about Greg Popovich and the way that he carries himself. And Scott relayed a personal story about the first time he ever talked to Greg Popovich and how he felt like Pop took pity on him almost. And I thought it was a really great story, and it culminates in this really explosive rant that was all over the media everywhere. And I thought that our angle on it, Scott personalizing it a little bit and talking about Popovich, I thought it did a good job of straddling that line where we talk about an issue that all of a sudden became relevant to us and our audience without making it distinctly political, but I did think it was relevant to our audience and relevant to the things that we cover just because we had a guy who was there. That's what does that, at least to me. And so I think I don't think that everybody has to stick to sports, but I want to at least defend ourselves, when I think we're in the right. And I think that's one of the cases where we're in the right. Another place, we get criticized is on writers' personal Twitter accounts. Now, if somebody decides that they want to be distinctly political on their personal Twitter, I think it's their prerogative. I think that sometimes there's a gripe to be made, especially in the case of a Waiting for Next Year writer that puts WFNY in their handle. I mean, I keep WFNY in my handle, so I think I do have a responsibility in some ways that I need to pay attention to the bill of goods that I've kind of sold, in order to get people to follow me, and that's talking about Cleveland sports. So, but then again, I at times I'm going to have a personal opinion, and I don't feel like on my personal Twitter account, which I own, whether or not I put WFNY in the front of it or not, I think I should be allowed to talk. I should be given a little bit of leeway, the same way I should be given leeway if I want to talk about rock and roll. I should be given a little bit of leeway if there's a specific political thing that I want to discuss on my personal Twitter account. And obviously, then it becomes your personal choice whether to follow me or not. And I understand that. And I know that every time I go even slightly out of my lane, that I'm risking the audience or the people who follow me for a certain thing unfollowing me. And so I'm wary of that. I think about it just like, you think about whether you want to continue following me every time you see something that veers even slightly out of the lane. So it's a fluid thing. It's a fluid thing. There are no hard and fast rules. And I think that we just need to keep talking about this stuff. If Scott is on hand when Greg Popovich goes off on President Trump and it becomes a huge national media story, isn't it kind of delusional if he doesn't talk about it? I mean, I know some of you don't want to hear about it. I understand that. But why not just pass over that one story on Waiting for Next Year? I think if you look at us as a percentage, if you look at us as what we do, I think we're vastly on message, and I think we're pretty responsible with not abusing the platform for something it wasn't meant to be. I think that, at times while we're waiting can veer a little bit because we've turned that into a personal column for whoever is writing it that day. And I think that our personal Twitter accounts, there's a little more leeway. But you're never going to see breaking down the Trump situation on the front pages of Waiting for Next Year. You're never going to see that because that's not what we do, and we know that. We have some self-awareness about what it is that we're good at and what we should be doing versus what we shouldn't be doing. So, no, I understand completely. I understand why it gives some of you pause, and I understand completely why we have to have a responsibility to do the right things and pay attention to what it is that you guys came to us for. But I can't say that we're never going to talk about politics again. It's impossible in sports. I mean, you look at the NFL over the last 3 months, all the teams that have been moving around, and every single one of those situations veers into politics as a local government and a bond issue and the people and stadium financing. And as long as we continue to operate in a world where professional sports intersects with the public-private partnership, where they raise bond issues to pay for stadiums and tax dollars and municipalities continue to own the venues, so to speak. That's just the way it goes. The fact is that Cleveland owns Cleveland Browns Stadium, or First Energy Stadium. The Cleveland Browns pay like $250,000 a year in rent, don't have to pay property taxes, don't have to let the city of Cleveland rent it out for their own events. They have exclusive use of it. And then at a certain point, the Cleveland has to step up and make improvements to it as well. So it's like these are things that are unavoidable. And Michael White, former Cleveland mayor, was a huge part of the story of the Cleveland Browns moving. It's inextricable. It's just inextricable at certain points. So it's up to you to make sure to decide if we're staying in our lane, and it's up to us to find that line where we talk about things that are relevant without overstepping and becoming distinctly political, because that isn't who we are, and that's not who we aim to be, at least not yet. No, that's not who we aim to be. A lot of us, I think if anybody wanted to jump into politics and they came and said that to me, I would say, hey, that's really great. I think maybe you should find another publication, because I think that while it's unavoidable, and I don't want to put my head in the sand and pretend like I'm an apolitical person, I think that it does have its time and place, and I think sports has its time and place, and we've dedicated our site to that time and place. And yes, it's going to cross over from time to time, and maybe it's even going to piss you off or make you uncomfortable, but we are cognizant of it. We are trying not to go too far, I think, or at least I'm not. I'm trying to. I think everybody at the site is wary of it. I just hope that, you continue to give us the leeway to figure out where that line is, so that, we are given the freedom to talk about issues that we need to talk about that intersect with government and sports, while also, letting us do film breakdowns like Joe Gilbert does. Column stuff about team dynamics of the Cavaliers, LeBron James, and whether he's right or wrong about the Cavaliers roster being top heavy. These are the things. So that's what I've got so far today. I might check back in with you later in the week, either as a solo podcaster or as with a guest. I hope I have a host of guests this week. I'm trying desperately to book people. It's been a little bit difficult, especially with the things that have been going on in the sports world. People have been pulled in all kinds of different directions. So I'll continue to work on that front. Thanks so much for your patience. Thanks for listening. Please give me any kind of feedback you need at Craig@waitingfornextyear.com. If you want to hear something, potentially hear something that you have to say on the podcast, send it to Craig@waitingfornextyear.com. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.